What if you woke up one morning legally married to a billionaire, but had no idea who he actually was? Sheng Ning faced this impossible situation when she signed a marriage contract with the mysterious Mr. Y to save her mother's life. As she navigates this strange arrangement, Shen Yi makes a dangerous vow: discover her husband's true identity, and she'll win her freedom. But what begins as a desperate search for answers transforms into something unexpected when the cold, distant CEO reveals glimpses of genuine affection beneath his calculated exterior. If you enjoyed the video or found it helpful, a like and a subscribe would mean the world to me. It really helps the channel grow and keeps you in the loop for all the latest content. What would you sacrifice to save someone you love? For Shen Yin, the answer was everything, including her freedom. The feeble light of dawn filtered through thin curtains in Shen Ning's tiny apartment as she counted the meager stack of bills on her wobbly kitchen table. The dim glow highlighted the deep shadows beneath her eyes, evidence of another sleepless night spent worrying. Her one-room apartment, located in the oldest part of the city, had peeling wallpaper and a persistent draft that no amount of makeshift repairs could fix. But it was home, the only security she had managed to create in a world that seemed determined to take everything from her. She glanced at the closed door leading to the small alcove where her mother slept. The rhythmic wheezing that escaped through the thin walls twisted Shen Ning's heart with each labored breath. 3 months ago, her mother had collapsed while preparing dinner. What they initially hoped was mere exhaustion had revealed itself as something far more sinister. A condition requiring specialized treatment that might as well have been on another planet for all their ability to afford it. "A little longer, Ma," Shen Ning whispered, knowing her mother couldn't hear. "I'll figure something out." Her words hung in the air, as insubstantial as her hope. The hospital administrator's voice echoed in her mind, clinical and detached. "Without immediate intervention, your mother's condition will continue to deteriorate." The procedure cost, the number that followed, had made Shen Ning's buckle. It represented years of income, an impossible mountain to climb, when she could barely afford next week's medication. That afternoon, Shen Ying sat stiffly on a polished wooden chair at the third bank that week. The loan officer across from her reviewed her application with an expression that had become painfully familiar. His eyes never met hers as he slid the papers back across the desk. "I'm sorry, Miss Shen, but without collateral or a stronger credit history, we simply cannot approve this loan. The amount you're requesting, relative to your income," he trailed off, his practiced sympathy failing to mask the finality of his decision. Shen Yin nodded mechanically, gathering her documents with trembling hands. Outside on the street, the bright sunshine felt like a mockery of her darkening circumstances. Each rejection narrowed her options, pushing her closer to an edge she couldn't bear to contemplate. Her phone buzzed with a message from her cousin Shino. "Meeting with father's business partner today. Almost certain he'll help. Don't worry." A fragile smile touched Shen Ning's lips. Perhaps her luck was finally changing. Shino had promised to speak with her father's wealthy associates, assuring Shen Ying that their family connections would surely yield assistance. It wasn't charity she wanted, just a chance, a bridge to carry her mother across this impossible chasm. 3 days later, that bridge collapsed. Shen Ning stood in the hospital corridor, her phone displaying Shino's message. "So sorry, couldn't convince him. Maybe try a payment plan?" Sending thoughts and prayers. The casual dismissal cut deeper than outright rejection. Shino had promised help with such conviction, had let Shen Ying believe that salvation was within reach. Now, with her mother being transferred to intensive care, that false hope felt like a deliberate cruelty. That evening, the hospital specialist delivered the final blow. "We can't delay any longer, Miss Shen. Without surgery within the next 2 weeks, your mother's chances decrease significantly. I understand your financial situation is difficult, but I'll find a way," Shen Ning interrupted, her voice stronger than she felt. "Please, just keep her comfortable until then." In her apartment that night, Shen Ning sat at her window, watching the city lights blur through her tears. The weight of impossibility pressed down on her chest until each breath felt like a struggle. Her mother's medication sat on the counter, the last refill she could afford. Beyond that lay only. The knock at her door came just after midnight. Cautious, Shen Ying peered through the peephole to find a professionally dressed woman holding a sleek leather portfolio. Against her better judgment, curiosity and desperation led her to open the door. "Miss Shen Ying?" The woman's voice was precise, her expression unreadable. "I represent a client who wishes to remain anonymous for now. May I come in? I have a proposition that might interest you." The woman placed a contract on Shen Ning's kitchen table, the crisp white paper stark against the worn surface. As she explained the terms, Shen Ning felt the room tilt slightly. The offer was simple and impossible all at once. Marriage to an unnamed wealthy man in exchange for complete coverage of her mother's medical expenses, past, present, and future. "Me?" Shen Ning asked, her voice barely audible. "Why would someone do this?" The woman's smile revealed nothing. "My client has his reasons. You would retain certain freedoms, of course, but the marriage must appear genuine to the outside world. The funds will be transferred immediately upon your signature, before the ceremony." Alone, after the woman left, Shen Ning stared at the contract until the words blurred together. The amount offered exceeded even what the hospital had quoted, enough to provide her mother with the best possible care and recovery support. All it would cost was her freedom, her future, her choice of who to love. Morning found her at her mother's bedside, watching the shallow rise and fall of her chest. The decision crystallized with each labored breath. What was her freedom worth, if she lost the only person who had always stood by her? What future could she build from the ashes of such regret? 2 days later, Shen Ning met the woman at a discreet legal office. With a deep breath and a silent prayer, she signed her name on the final page. Her hand trembled so badly that her signature looked like a stranger's. "Congratulations," the woman said, sliding an envelope across the table. "The first payment has already been made to the hospital. Your mother's surgery is scheduled for tomorrow morning." The relief that flooded through Shen Ying nearly brought her to her knees. She clutched the confirmation letter from the hospital, proof that her sacrifice had not been in vain. Yet beneath the relief lurked a shadow of fear. What kind of man arranged marriages this way? What would he expect from her once they were legally bound? As the woman collected the signed documents, Shen Ni found her voice. "When will I meet him? My husband?" "In good time," the woman replied, with that same inscrutable smile. "For now, focus on your mother. A car will collect you 3 days from now for the ceremony. Wear the dress that will be delivered tomorrow." Standing alone in the hallway afterward, Shen Ning pressed her forehead against the cool wall and closed her eyes. She had just traded her life for her mother's, a bargain she would make again, without hesitation, yet one that filled her with quiet dread. The marriage certificate bore 2 names, but Shen Ning stood alone at the altar that day, exchanging vows with an empty space beside her. What kind of man arranges a marriage, yet refuses to show his face? The answer would prove more unsettling than the question itself. The ceremony defied all convention. A sterile affair conducted in a government office with 2 witnesses she'd never met before and would likely never see again. They watched with blank expressions as she signed the papers, her signature trembling slightly beside the bold, confident strokes of her mysterious husband's name. There was no exchange of rings, no celebration dinner, not even the customary red for good fortune, just paperwork, signatures, and a stamp that officially bound her to a man she'd never seen. "The car is waiting to take you to your new residence, Mrs. Y," said the woman who had initially presented the contract. Her tone was professionally detached, as if arranging shadow marriages was simply another Tuesday for her. Shen Ying followed, clutching a small suitcase containing her few belongings, still trying to absorb the reality of what she had done. The sleek black car with tinted windows wound through the city, eventually pulling up to one of those gleaming high-rises that Shen Ying had only ever seen from a distance. the kind of building where a single apartment cost more than what most people earned in a decade. The driver escorted her through a private entrance, where a security guard nodded respectfully and called her Mrs. Y without a hint of surprise at her modest appearance. The elevator required a special key card to access the penthouse level. When the doors slid open, Shen Ning stepped directly into what was apparently now her home, a sprawling apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows, offering a panoramic view of the city she'd only ever experienced from ground level. "Your husband has asked me to inform you that this entire penthouse is at your disposal," said the driver, who apparently doubled as some sort of butler. "However, he specifically requests that you respect his privacy by never entering the East Wing. Those rooms are strictly off-limits." Shen Ning nodded mutely, still overwhelmed by the marble floors, designer furniture, and the sheer space of it all. The driver, or butler, handed her an envelope and departed with a formal bow, leaving her alone in the echoing silence of her gilded cage. Inside the envelope, she found a typed note. "Welcome to your new home. You'll find your allowance has been deposited into the account detailed on the attached card. Your mother's medical expenses have been covered in full, including rehabilitation and follow-up care. Please make yourself comfortable and respect the boundary of the East Wing." At first night, she slept fitfully, the king-sized bed feeling impossibly large for her small frame. In the morning, she half expected to find her new husband at the breakfast table, but the penthouse remained empty, except for her days. Waking to solitude, exploring the permitted areas of her new home, finding envelopes with new instructions or information periodically appearing on the coffee table. When she visited her mother at the hospital, the change was remarkable. The best specialists had been consulted, the surgery performed by a renowned surgeon, the recovery room private and filled with flowers. The nurses treated her with newfound respect when they saw the name on the insurance forms. "Your husband has been very specific about ensuring the best care," one of them mentioned casually. Shen Ning returned to the empty penthouse each night, her gratitude for her mother's treatment warring with the strangeness of her new existence. She was married yet single, wealthy yet dependent, free yet constrained. Then came the first signs that her husband was more than just a signature on paper. One morning, she found her favorite tea, a specific brand from a small shop across town that she hadn't mentioned to anyone, stocked in the kitchen cabinet. The bathroom was suddenly supplied with the exact brand of shampoo she had used before her marriage, though she'd been using what was provided in the penthouse. Someone was watching her, learning her, perhaps even caring about her comfort in ways both thoughtful and unsettling. A week later, pulling open a drawer in search of a pen, Shen Ning discovered a small collection of classical music records, her secret passion that she'd never had the means to indulge. How could he possibly know about this? She'd never owned a record player before, yet there one sat in the corner of the living room, elegant and waiting. The most startling moment came on her third week in the penthouse. Unable to sleep, she ventured to the kitchen for a glass of water well past midnight. As she padded down the hallway, she heard a soft sound of movement from the forbidden East Wing, a door closing gently. Footsteps. She froze, heart pounding, as a tall shadow passed at the end of the corridor. Just for a moment, she caught a glimpse of a man's profile, strong jaw, straight nose, before he disappeared around the corner. Her husband, in the same apartment, existing alongside her like a ghost. The next morning, she found the kitchen stocked with fresh fruit, cut exactly how she preferred it. A coincidence, perhaps, but the timing made her wonder if he'd observed her eating habits during those late-night visitations. Determined to learn more, she began staying up late, listening for his movements. But he seemed to sense her awareness and became more careful. The ghost grew more elusive, even as his presence became more evident through the thoughtful provisions that continued to appear. Then came the discovery that truly shook her. Searching through a desk for stationery, she found a framed photograph hidden beneath some papers. With trembling hands, she lifted it to the light and saw herself, 5 years younger, serving soup at a charity event, at the hospital where her mother had first been treated. It was before her father had passed, before the financial struggles had become so severe. She remembered that day clearly. How proud she had been to volunteer, how hopeful about her future. But what sent a chill down her spine was the realization that this photo had been taken by someone watching her, someone who had kept it all these years. Her husband hadn't simply chosen her at random because she needed money for her mother's treatment. He had known her, observed her sister, perhaps even followed her journey for years. At night, she couldn't sleep at all, her mind racing with questions. What did he want from her? Why maintain this elaborate charade? Was she in danger? Or was there something else entirely behind this strange arrangement? At dawn, she found an envelope on her bedside table, placed there while she pretended to sleep. Inside was a handwritten note, the script elegant and distinctive. "Discover who I am, and I'll grant you the divorce you seek." The challenge was clear, the stakes defined. He was offering her freedom, but first, she would need to uncover the identity of the man who had orchestrated this elaborate scenario, the man who knew her so well, yet remained a shadow. What kind of man possesses enough influence to monitor your every move, reject your job application with a single glance at your name, and remain completely invisible, despite being one of the most powerful figures in the country? As Shen Ning stood outside the imposing Y Group tower, she realized she wasn't just married to a man. She was entangled with an empire. The coffee shop where Shen Ying once worked now seemed like a distant memory from another life. There, she had worried about making rent. Now, she navigated a penthouse where even the ambient lighting adjusted automatically to her preferences. Every morning, staff appeared silently to prepare breakfast before disappearing just as mysteriously. As if trained to remain invisible, they moved with practiced efficiency, their eyes always downcast, never meeting her gaze directly, a choreographed performance of servitude that made her increasingly uncomfortable. "Would Madam prefer the salmon, or perhaps the avocado toast this morning?" a uniformed woman asked, her posture rigid as she stood at a calculated distance. Shen Ning bit her lip, still unused to being addressed so formally. "Just some fruit, please? And please, call me Shen Ning." The woman nodded politely, but continued using madam the next day and the day after that. The invisible barrier between Shen Ning and the staff remained firmly in place. Another reminder that she had entered a world with its own unyielding rules. At night, Shen Ning would often stand by the floor-to-ceiling windows, watching the city lights flicker like stars beneath her. From this height, the struggles of her former life seemed impossibly small. She thought of her co-workers at the coffee shop, probably closing up now, counting tips, and wondering if they'd make rent. Meanwhile, she stood in a penthouse worth more than they might earn in their lifetimes, wearing silk pajamas that cost more than her old monthly salary. "Who you?" she whispered to her reflection in the glass, no longer recognizing the woman staring back at her. Her first real clue came unexpectedly. While searching for a pen in the study, she opened a drawer to find stationery, embossed with an elegant Y in gold leaf. The same monogram appeared on towels in the bathroom, on crystal glasses in the bar cabinet, and subtly etched into the corners of picture frames. It wasn't merely a letter, it was a brand, a symbol of ownership and power. That night, Shen Ning searched online for information about the Y Group. Headlines from financial news outlets described the corporate behemoth reshaping markets across Asia, with subsidiaries in technology, real estate, pharmaceuticals, and media. The articles painted a picture of a vast corporate empire, with tentacles reaching into every profitable industry, yet information about its leadership remained frustratingly vague. A famously reclusive CEO of Y Group continues to avoid public appearances, one article stated, accompanied by a blurry photograph taken from behind, showing only the silhouette of a tall man entering a black car. Could this shadowy figure be her husband? The timing aligned her mysterious marriage, coinciding with the period when the Y Group's CEO had reportedly withdrawn even further from public view. Shen Ying printed several articles, spreading them across the dining table as she searched for connections, for any fragment that might reveal her husband's identity. The next morning, the articles had vanished. In their place sat a business magazine, open to a feature about women executives in finance. It wasn't a threat. It was a suggestion. If she wanted to understand this world, she would need to learn its language. Chen Ning took the hint. She subscribed to business journals and financial newspapers. She downloaded vocabulary apps to learn corporate terminology. At night, she studied fashion magazines to understand the unspoken dress codes of the elite. She observed how wealth moved differently, not loud and flashy as portrayed in movies, but with quiet confidence that needed no announcement. The penthouse library became her sanctuary, its shelves stocked with books on economics, business strategy, and corporate history. She noticed new editions appearing regularly, books that aligned perfectly with her emerging interests, as if someone was monitoring her progress, guiding her education from the shadows. "Your husband has excellent taste in literature," commented the housekeeper one morning, noticing Shen Ying reading a biography of a famous entrepreneur. "Does he come here when I'm out?" Shen Ying asked casually. The housekeeper's expression revealed nothing. "I wouldn't know, madam. I only attend to your needs." But Shen Ning knew someone was watching. She felt it in the way certain drawers in the study were rearranged, in the way her research notes sometimes appeared in slightly different order than she'd left them. Her husband wasn't just hiding, he was evaluating her, testing her adaptability to his world. 2 months into her strange marriage, Shen Ying made a decision. If her husband wouldn't reveal himself, she would venture into his domain. She applied for an entry-level position at a marketing subsidiary of the Y Group, using her maiden name on the application. Her qualifications were modest but adequate. She had completed 2 years of business courses before financial necessity forced her to drop out. The day of her interview, Shen Yin chose her outfit carefully, professional but not ostentatious. She took public transportation instead of calling the car service available to her, determined to earn this position on her own merits. The Y Group's headquarters stretched skyward, a gleaming tower of glass and steel that dominated the city skyline. Inside, employees moved with purpose through the vast marble lobby, their security badges displaying the now familiar Y logo. Shen Ying approached the reception desk, heart pounding with nervous anticipation. "I have an interview with Human Resources at 9, she said, presenting her identification. The receptionist's polite smile froze as she scanned Shen Ning's ID. Her fingers paused over the keyboard, eyes widening slightly, before her professional mask slipped back into place. "A moment, please," she said, picking up a phone and speaking in hushed tones. Minutes later, a stern woman in a charcoal suit approached. "Miss Chen, I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. The position has been filled, but I confirmed the interview yesterday," Shen Ning protested. The woman's eyes held no warmth. "I apologize for the inconvenience. However, I should inform you that applying for positions within the Y Group or its subsidiaries would not be appropriate for someone in your situation." "A situation?" The woman leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Your marriage contract has specific clauses regarding employment. Perhaps you should review it more carefully. There are powerful people who monitor such matters with great interest." Shen Ning felt the blood drain from her face. Her marriage, which she had believed was a private arrangement, was apparently common knowledge to certain people within the company. More disturbing was the implication that her movements were being tracked, her actions scrutinized. "Who told you about my marriage?" she asked. "No one tells us anything directly, Miss Chen. But in this building, very little remains unknown for long." The woman straightened, resuming her professional demeanor. "Now, if you'll excuse me, security will escort you out. Rain has a way of washing away pretenses, even for the most guarded hearts. As security escorted Shen Ning from the Yi Group building, the gray clouds gathering overhead matched her deflated spirits. Her rejection had been swift and decisive, not even a proper interview before being shown the door. The first heavy drops began to fall as she reached the sidewalk, quickly intensifying into a merciless downpour that seemed determined to punish her further. Within seconds, her carefully chosen outfit, the most professional one she owned, clung to her frame as she desperately scanned the busy street for a taxi. Each passing cab already carried passengers, their warm, dry interiors taunting her as she stood increasingly drenched on the curb. The rain plastered her hair against her face, mascara beginning to run down her cheeks, despite her attempts to shield herself with her small handbag. She had left in such a hurry that she hadn't thought to bring an umbrella. After 10 futile minutes, Shen Ye's shivering had become uncontrollable. The temperature had dropped significantly. "You need a ride?" The deep voice that emerged carried authority, yet something else, a hesitation, perhaps, that caught her attention. The man's face remained obscured, partially by the window's limited opening and partially by the dim lighting inside the vehicle. Shen Ying froze, her social instincts warning against entering a stranger's car, battling with her practical need to escape the downpour. "I'm fine, thank you," she replied automatically, even as another shiver racked her body. "You're soaking wet," the voice observed, neither impatient nor particularly warm. "This rain isn't stopping anytime soon." As if to emphasize his point, thunder rumbled overhead, and the rainfall intensified. A passing car splashed through a puddle, sending a wave of dirty water across her already soaked shoes. Making her decision, Shen Yin nodded and moved toward the vehicle as the door unlocked with a soft click. The interior of the car enveloped her in warmth and the subtle scent of expensive leather. As her eyes adjusted to the dim lighting, she could make out the silhouette of a man in a tailored suit, seated as far from her door as possible. His face remained turned slightly away, features indistinct in the shadows. The privacy partition between them and the driver was raised, creating an intimate space that suddenly felt both suffocating and electric. "Thank you," she said, acutely aware of how she was dripping onto the immaculate leather seats. "I'm sorry about the water." He made a dismissive gesture with his hand. "Where can I take you?" The question was direct, his tone businesslike, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that his voice carried a familiarity she couldn't place. Shen Ning gave her address, and the car pulled smoothly into traffic. The silence that followed wasn't exactly uncomfortable, but it vibrated with unspoken tension. Neither spoke, yet Shen Ning felt the weight of his attention, even as he kept his face averted. His presence filled the space between them, commanding yet restrained, as if carefully measuring the physical distance separating their bodies. The rhythmic sound of rain against the windows and the gentle hum of the engine created a strangely intimate atmosphere. Shen Ning found herself studying what little she could see of him. Broad shoulders beneath an expertly tailored jacket, hands that rested with deliberate stillness on his knees, the controlled rise and fall of his chest with each breath. Though they weren't speaking, she felt as though a wordless conversation was taking place through the air between them. Without warning, the car hit a deep pothole, sending Shen Yin lurching sideways. Before she could brace herself, she collided with her mysterious companion. His arm moved with startling reflexes, catching her before she could fall against him completely. For a breathless moment, they froze in this unexpected proximity, her face inches from his, close enough to feel the warmth of his breath. In that fragmented second, several things happened simultaneously. His scent, sandalwood with subtle notes of something uniquely personal, triggered a flash of recognition she couldn't quite place. Her hand had instinctively gripped his forearm, feeling the solid strength beneath the expensive fabric. And most disorienting of all, a jolt of awareness passed between them like an electric current, something primal and undeniable that had nothing to do with their surroundings. "Are you all right?" His voice had changed, the businesslike tone replaced by something softer, almost gentle. The question carried genuine concern, and she felt, rather than saw, his gaze finally meeting hers directly in the dimness. "Yes," she managed, her own voice unexpectedly breathless, as she straightened and returned to her side of the seat. "I'm fine. Thank you." The moment had lasted only seconds, but Shen Ning felt fundamentally altered by it. Something about his touch had triggered a sense of déjà vu so powerful it left her disoriented. Her body retained the memory of his steadying hand, the brief connection feeling significant in ways she couldn't articulate. They completed the remainder of the journey in silence, though it was no longer the same quality of silence. Something had shifted, an invisible barrier breached by their momentary physical connection. When the car eventually stopped outside her building, Shen Ying hesitated before reaching for the door handle. "Thank you for the ride," she said, turning toward him. The interior light remained off, his features still largely hidden, but she could make out a strong jaw and the straight line of his nose. "May I know your name?" He seemed to consider the question carefully before answering. "Someone who happened to be going your way." The response was evasive, yet delivered with a note of something almost like regret. Shen Ning nodded, accepting the non-answer with a small smile. "Well, thank you anyway. Someone going my way." As she moved to exit, the sleeve of his jacket shifted slightly, and a glint of metal caught her eye. On his right hand, he wore a distinctive ring, a geometric design that incorporated the letter Y in its pattern. The insignia matched exactly what she had seen embossed on official documents from the Y Group that had occasionally appeared in her apartment. Her heart rate accelerated as she stepped out into the now gentle rain, the door closing behind her with a soft thud. The car remained stationary until she entered her building, as if ensuring her safe arrival. Only after the lobby door closed behind her did she hear the engine purr as the vehicle pulled away. That night, Shen Ying lay awake in her bed, replaying every moment of the encounter. The strange sense of connection, the familiarity of his scent, the distinctive ring, these pieces began forming a picture she hadn't expected. In her dreams, when sleep finally came, she felt again the steadying pressure of his hand on her arm, saw fragments of a face still hidden in shadow, heard the unexpected gentleness in his voice asking if she was all right. The most dangerous traps are those we walk into willingly, drawn by what we desperately want to believe. When Shen Ning's phone rang with a job offer from Night Vision Group, something felt both terribly wrong and perfectly right. The caller, a woman with a voice as smooth and precise as cut crystal, explained that they were creating a personal assistant position, specifically for her, complete with a salary package that made Shen Ning's breath catch, 4 times the market rate, a company apartment in the executive building, a car service, and comprehensive benefits typically reserved for vice presidents with decades of experience. "There must be some mistake," Shen Ning said, her grip tightening on the phone. "I don't have the qualifications for such a position." "There's no mistake, Miss Shen," the woman replied with practiced ease. "The president specifically requested you by name." Shen Ying's mind raced through possibilities. The timing was too perfect to be coincidence. 3 days after the mysterious car ride with a man wearing a Y Group ring. This wasn't chance. This was calculation. The job offer was a carefully positioned chess piece in whatever game her shadow husband was playing. She accepted the position. The Night Vision Group headquarters occupied the east wing of the Y Group tower, its entrance marked by a sleek obsidian logo that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. As Shen Ning approached the security desk, a woman in an impeccably tailored suit materialized beside her. "Shen," she said, not a question but a confirmation. "I'm Director Zhang. Please follow me." The elevator whisked them upward, bypassing dozens of floors without stopping. Shen Yan noticed Director Zhang studying her reflection in the polished doors, assessing her with cool detachment. "The president rarely involves himself in hiring decisions, especially at your level," she said finally. "Many here have worked years to earn his notice. You've managed it without trying. That makes you interesting, and potentially threatening. To a lot of people, the executive floor hummed with purpose and privilege. As Director Zhang led her through the open workspace, Shen Ning felt the weight of stares following her progress, some curious, others openly hostile. A woman at the coffee station whispered to her companion, their eyes tracking Shen Ning with undisguised judgment. In the conference room, a cluster of men in expensive suits paused their conversation to observe her passage. "Is everyone always this welcoming?" Shen Ning asked quietly. Director Zhang's lips twitched in what might have been amusement. "You've bypassed 3 levels of interviews, 2 rounds of security clearance and a probationary period. Of course they resent you. Your challenge is to prove their assumptions wrong." They arrived at a glass-walled office, with views of the city that rivaled those from the penthouse. Unlike the stark minimalism of most corporate spaces, this one contained subtle personal touches. A small ceramic sculpture, a shelf of books with well-worn spines, a single orchid blooming on the credenza. "This will be your workspace," Director Zhang explained. "You'll be supporting the President's Special Projects Division, reporting directly to me. Your responsibilities will evolve based on performance." "Will I meet the President?" Shen Ning asked, trying to keep her voice neutral despite the quickening of her pulse. "Tomorrow morning, 9 a.m. He's requested a private introduction." Director Zhang handed her a tablet. "Your assignments for today. I suggest you get started." Alone in the office, Shen Ying examined the tasks on her tablet. They were puzzling in their diversity. Arrange a donation to a children's hospital foundation. Compile research on a struggling textile factory in her old neighborhood. Draft responses to 3 different business proposals with conflicting interests. None required traditional assistant skills like scheduling or correspondence. She worked through each task methodically, noticing the subtle psychological dimensions hidden within them. The Children's Hospital Foundation had rejected a major donor last year when his money was linked to environmental violations. The textile factory represented a choice between maximizing profit through automation or preserving 300 jobs. The business proposals each presented ethical dilemmas alongside financial opportunity. These weren't administrative tasks. They were moral and ethical evaluations, disguised as routine work. As afternoon faded into evening, Shen Ying discovered a cream-colored envelope tucked beneath her keyboard. Inside was a handwritten note in the same distinctive script she'd found throughout the penthouse. "Integrity when no one is watching is the truest measure of character." She traced her finger over the fluid strokes, confirmation that her mysterious husband and the company president were one and the same. The carefully constructed labyrinth around her was beginning to reveal its shape, if not yet its purpose. Director Jiang appeared at her door just as Shen Ying was completing the last assignment. "The president is satisfied with your work today," she said, scanning Shen Ying's responses on her own tablet. "Particularly your handling of the textile factory situation. Most new hires recommend full automation. 300 families depend on those jobs," Shen Ning replied. "Efficiency isn't always measured in quarterly profits." Something like approval flickered across Director Jiang's face. "Tomorrow's meeting has been scheduled for 30 minutes. The president is extremely private and communicates directly with very few people. Consider this an unusual honor." That night, Shen Ning barely slept. After months of shadows and cryptic notes, she would finally see the face of the man who had arranged their unusual marriage. She rehearsed questions, prepared arguments, imagined confrontations, all while a strange undercurrent of anticipation hummed beneath her practiced ear. Arrived with cruel irony. Shen Ying had just stepped onto the executive floor, her heartbeat a thunderous countdown to the 9 a.m. meeting, when Director Zhang intercepted her with uncharacteristic tension around her eyes. "The meeting is cancelled," she announced. "The president was called to Shanghai on urgent business late last night. His flight left at 4 a.m. Disappointment crashed through Shen Ning with unexpected force. "When will he return? His schedule is unpredictable. It could be days or weeks." Director Zhang handed her a sealed envelope. "He left this for you." Inside, was another handwritten note. Some things worth having are worth waiting for. This delay is not of my choosing. Frustration and determination warred within her. She had come so close to answers, only to have them snatched away at the final moment. Was this another test, a deliberate evasion, or truly unavoidable circumstance? Shen Ning channeled her frustration into her work, attacking the day's assignments with fierce concentration. As evening descended, she gathered her things, the building gradually emptying around her. The executive floor, so bustling with activity during the day, grew silent and shadowed as lights automatically dimmed to conserve energy. She was waiting for the elevator when movement on the executive balcony caught her attention. A private outdoor space, accessible only from the president's suite. A tall figure stood at the railing, silhouetted against the city lights. Though distance and shadows obscured his features, something in his posture conveyed absolute authority and isolation in equal measure. For a breathless moment, Shen Yi was certain he was looking directly at her across the expanse of darkened office space. The elevator arrived with a soft chime, breaking the connection. When she glanced back after stepping inside, the balcony stood empty. Success often casts the longest shadows. As Shen Ning's competence in her new position became increasingly apparent, the atmosphere around her shifted. What began as curious glances and whispered comments transformed into something far more sinister. The quiet respect she had begun to earn from a handful of colleagues seemed to intensify the hostility from others. The first sign came when Shen Ying arrived at work to find her computer desktop wiped clean of crucial files she'd spent hours organizing the previous evening. When she mentioned this to IT support, the technician's eyes shifted nervously. "Might be a system glitch," he muttered, though his expression suggested otherwise. 3 days later, she arrived at a client meeting 20 minutes late, only to discover someone had changed the time in her calendar without notification. The clients had already left, irritated by her apparent unprofessionalism. "These things happen when you're new," Director Zhang said dismissively when she tried to explain, yet something in his tone suggested he didn't believe it was mere coincidence. The pattern continued, emails she never sent appearing in clients' inboxes, documents altered just enough to create embarrassing errors. Each incident seemed designed not just to inconvenience her, but to systematically dismantle her credibility. Then came the whispers, growing louder with each passing day. "I heard she was personally selected by the president," one woman remarked loudly in the break room, her voice dripping with insinuation. "Must be nice to have." One morning, Shen Ning rounded a corner to find her cousin Shino emerging from the Human Resources Department. The shock on both their faces mirrored each other perfectly. Neither had known the other worked at Night Vision Group. The momentary surprise on Shenyo's face quickly transformed into something calculating and cold. "Cousin, what a delightful surprise!" Shino exclaimed, his voice loud enough to draw attention from nearby desks. "I've been here 3 months in corporate strategy. How interesting that you suddenly appear in such a prestigious position." His emphasis on the word made it sound like an accusation. That night, Shen Ning discovered through company records that Shino had transferred to Night Vision Group only 2 weeks earlier, right after she had started. This wasn't coincidence. It was calculation. The cousin who had once promised help with her mother's medical bills only to disappear when needed most, was now positioned perfectly to observe her every move. Their confrontation came a week later, in the deserted parking garage. "What exactly do you want, Shino?" Shen Ning demanded, tired of the sabotage. His smile never reached his eyes. "I want what you have, cousin. The president's favor, the special treatment. Did you think nobody would notice? A nobody from nowhere? Suddenly, with the ear of the most powerful man in the company?" He stepped closer. "You've always been a thief of opportunity. First with our grandfather's affection, now with this position you clearly." "I earned my place here," she replied, voice steady despite her racing heart. "Did you? Or did you earn it on your back?" The viciousness of his words hung in the air between them. "Your secret won't stay hidden forever, Shen Ying. People are already talking. It's only a matter of time before everyone knows exactly how you climbed so high, so fast." The rumors intensified after that confrontation. Female executives began to openly exclude her from lunch gatherings and informal meetings where crucial information was shared. One woman, Victoria Chen, Senior Vice President of Operations, seemed particularly determined to see Shen Ning fail. Every proposal Shen Ning presented was met with Victoria's scathing criticism. Every idea dismissed before it could be fully explained. "Some women are threatened by intelligence and beauty," Director Zhang murmured, after one particularly brutal meeting. "Others are threatened by those who bypassed the ladder they had to climb." It was the closest he'd come to acknowledging the targeted nature of the hostilities surrounding her. A systematic isolation might have been bearable if not for what happened at the quarterly executive reception. Shen Ning had prepared meticulously, researching every executive who would attend, memorizing company achievements to discuss intelligently. She wore a modest but elegant dress, determined to present herself as a professional worthy of her position. She was engaged in conversation with two board members when Victoria appeared at her elbow, champagne glass in hand. "Gentlemen, I see you've met our president's special project." The pause was deliberate, loaded with implication. Quite the fascinating background our Shen Ning has, from poverty to power, in one very convenient marriage. The room seemed to freeze. Shen Ying felt blood drain from her face. "I don't know what you're talking about," she managed. But Victoria's smile only widened. "Oh, but you do. The mysterious marriage certificate filed 6 months ago. The convenient coincidence of your mother's medical bills being paid immediately after. Then the miraculous job offer that bypassed all normal channels." Victoria turned to address the growing circle of onlookers. "Our little gold digger has been quite busy, hasn't she?" Someone had investigated her past, not just casually, but methodically. They had uncovered her marriage, twisted the circumstances, and crafted a narrative that painted her as a calculating opportunist who had seduced her way into both wealth and position. As humiliation burned through her, Shen Ying realized this was no random attack. This was a coordinated effort to destroy her. In that moment of public humiliation, Shen Yin made a decision. She would not cry. She would not run. Instead, she looked Victoria directly in the eyes. "My personal life is precisely that, personal. My work stands on its own merit. If you have concerns about my performance, I welcome specific feedback in a professional setting." The measured response seemed to infuriate Victoria more than tears would have. Before she could launch another attack, an authoritative voice cut through the tension. "Ms. Chen, your presence is required in the president's office. Immediately." The voice belonged to Ms. Lin, the president's notoriously stern executive assistant. Victoria's face tightened with anger, but she complied, leaving Shen Ning standing alone in a circle of curious, judgmental faces. Later that evening, as Shen Ning gathered her belongings to leave, Ms. Lin appeared at her office door. "Walk with me," she commanded, rather than requested. In the privacy of the elevator, the older woman finally spoke. "Your husband is aware of today's incident." The direct acknowledgement of her marriage stunned Shen Ning into silence. "What you may not understand," Ms. Lin continued, "is that these challenges are not random. You are being tested, Ms. Shen. Your reactions are being closely monitored." "By whom? My husband? Victoria?" "By those who need to know if you are worthy of the position you hold and the man you married." The elevator doors opened, but Ms. Lin held them with one hand. "The president does not make decisions lightly, particularly not personal ones. There are those who believe they know what's best for him, and they will go to extraordinary lengths to protect their vision of his future." The guardian angel line separating protection from obsession is thinner than Shen Ying had ever imagined. As she stood in the dim light of the restricted archive room, her fingers trembling over the photograph she'd discovered, a chill ran down her spine that had nothing to do with the building's excessive air conditioning. The image showed a charity hospital event from her teenage years. a fundraiser she had attended with her mother before any hint of illness had touched their lives. What made her blood run cold wasn't the sight of her younger self with a hopeful smile, but rather the figure standing in the background, partially obscured by a column, yet unmistakably watching her. "This can't be possible," she whispered, bringing the photograph closer to the light. The man's features were younger, less hardened by years of corporate battles, but the intensity in his gaze was identical to what she had glimpsed in the brief moments with her mysterious husband. This wasn't coincidence or chance. It was calculation spanning years. She slipped the photograph into her bag, her mind racing as she carefully exited the archives. The security guard nodded as she passed, unaware that she had just discovered something that would fundamentally alter her understanding of her marriage. Walking through the corridor, memories began to surface like bubbles in still water. 7 years ago, when her mother had experienced her first health scare, years before the collapse that had precipitated their current arrangement, a stranger had appeared in the hospital waiting room. He hadn't spoken directly to her, instead conversing with a doctor nearby. Yet somehow, within hours, her mother had been moved to a private room, seen by specialists, and received treatment that should have been far beyond their financial reach. Shen Ning had tried to find him afterward, to express her gratitude, but he had vanished. The hospital administrator had simply informed her that an anonymous benefactor had covered the expenses, and Shen Ning had accepted this unexpected blessing without questioning its source. Now, sitting at her desk at Night Vision Group, she pulled up financial records she had discreetly accessed using her position. A pattern emerged that made her dizzy with its implications. For years, anonymous donations had arrived precisely when her mother needed treatment. School fees had mysteriously been paid when she risked dropping out. The tiny apartment she had lived in, the landlord had inexplicably frozen the rent despite raising it for every other tenant in the building. "He's been watching over me this entire time," she murmured, equal parts disturbed and moved by the revelation. The marriage contract hadn't been a random opportunity. It had been the culmination of years of silent guardianship. But why? What possible motivation could drive someone with such power and wealth to focus so intently on a woman with no connections, no influence, and nothing to offer in return? When she returned to the penthouse that evening, she viewed it with new eyes. Every carefully selected item, every preference catered to without having been spoken aloud. These weren't just the actions of a considerate, if distant, husband. They were the continuation of a pattern that had begun long before she had ever signed the marriage contract. With determination hardening her resolve, Shen Ying made a decision. She would no longer be a passive participant in this elaborate scenario. The next morning, she arrived at Ms. Lin's office before anyone else, waiting in the dimly lit room for the president's assistant to arrive. "I need to speak with you," Shen Ning said without preamble, when Ms. Lin appeared, her ever-present tablet tucked under her arm. "About him. About why he's been watching me for years." Ms. Lin's expression remained impassive, but a slight tightening around her eyes betrayed her surprise. "I'm afraid I don't know what you're referring to, Mrs. Y." Shen Yin placed the photograph on the desk between them. "I think you do. I want to know why a man I've never properly met has been arranging my life from the shadows for nearly a decade. Why not simply approach me directly? Why this elaborate charade?" For several long moments, Ms. Lin said nothing, her gaze moving between the photograph and Shen Ning's determined expression. Finally, she seemed to come to a decision. "The president values his privacy above all else," she began, carefully. "His position requires it, but his nature demands it even more. He has difficulties with direct social interaction that most people couldn't begin to understand." "Social anxiety?" Shen Ning asked, pieces starting to fit together. His avoidance of public appearances, the elaborate measures to maintain distance, even within his own home. "It's part of it," Ms. Lin acknowledged, "combined with obsessive-compulsive tendencies that make normal relationships nearly impossible for him. His mind works differently than most people's. Brilliant in business, but struggling with the ordinary connections others take for granted. Shen Ying tried to reconcile this information with the powerful, intimidating figure who controlled an empire. But why me? Of all people, why focus on someone he doesn't even know? Miss Lin's expression softened almost imperceptibly. Because he does know you, in his way. Your first meeting wasn't in that photograph. You were 16, volunteering at a hospital where his mother was receiving treatment. Every other volunteer avoided her room. Her condition made her difficult, demanding, but you went in anyway. Day after day, reading to her when she was too weak to hold a book herself. The memory surfaced slowly. An elderly woman with piercing eyes, harsh words that masked pain, and a son who visited only after hours, when the corridors were empty. Shen Ning had barely glimpsed him then, just a tall figure, slipping away as she arrived for her shift. He never forgot that kindness, Ms. Lin continued. When he later learned about your mother's health issues, he saw an opportunity to repay what he considered a debt. But his condition made direct interaction impossible. Supporting you from a distance was the only way he knew how to help. And the marriage, Shen Ning pressed. How does that fit into repaying a debt? Lin hesitated. Your mother's condition worsened. The treatment she needed required ongoing care that occasional donations couldn't cover. The marriage provided a legal framework to ensure her care would continue indefinitely. And there were other considerations. The considerations, those are not for me to share, Ms. Lin said firmly. Some questions only the president himself can answer. Shen Ning absorbed this information, emotions warring within her, anger at being manipulated, confusion about his true motives, and a reluctant appreciation for the silent support that had sustained her family for years. Protection or obsession. The line seemed increasingly blurred. Thank you for your honesty, she finally said, rising to leave. Please tell your employer that I appreciate understanding part of the truth at last. That night, after hours of reflection, Shen Ying made her decision. She wrote a note in careful handwriting, walked to the forbidden east wing of the penthouse, and slipped it under the door that had remained closed to her since the day she arrived. The note was simple. I know you've been watching me for years. It's time we talked face to face. For Shen Ning, anticipation had crystallized into determination. The silence of the empty office wrapped around her like a familiar blanket as she organized reports past midnight. The gentle hum of the air conditioning her only companion. Everyone else had long departed, leaving the 43rd floor in that peculiar stillness that only exists in corporate buildings after hours. Her note demanding a face-to-face meeting had been delivered days ago, yet no response had come. She had begun to wonder if her bold move had only driven him further into the shadows. The soft chime of the elevator broke the silence. Shen Ying's fingers froze over her keyboard, her breath catching as the polished doors slid open with mechanical precision. A tall figure stood motionless in the elevator, his silhouette unmistakable, even before he stepped into the dimly lit office space. The company president, her husband, had finally appeared. He moved with a cautious deliberation of someone entering unfamiliar territory, though this was his domain. In the soft glow of her desk lamp, Shen Yi finally saw clearly the face that had been hidden from her for months. The strong jawline she had glimpsed in shadow, the deep-set eyes that seemed to catalog every detail of her face, the slight tension in his shoulders that betrayed his discomfort. You came, she said, her voice steadier than she felt. Your note left little room for continued avoidance. His voice carried the same depth she remembered from the rainy night, but now held an undercurrent of vulnerability that caught her off guard. As he approached her desk, his gaze darted away from direct eye contact, settling instead on the scattered documents before her. With methodical precision, he aligned the edges of her papers, straightening them into perfect right. You're him? Shen Ni whispered, recognizing washing over her in waves. The man from the car that night, and the shadow in my photograph from years ago. A muscle twitched in his jaw. Yes, the confirmation hung between them, reshaping the air they shared. He gestured toward his office, and Shen Ying rose, following him through the glass door she had never been permitted to enter before. Inside, the space reflected its owner, meditatiously organized. Nothing out of place. He adjusted a pen on his desk to align perfectly with a notepad before turning to face her. "I never intended for us to meet this way," he began, each word carefully measured. "Circumstances have forced my hand." "What circumstances?" Shen Ning challenged, her voice soft but firm. "The fact that I discovered your surveillance, or that I finally demanded answers?" "Both," he admitted with unexpected frankness. "And the increasing difficulty of maintaining distance when proximity became necessary." His fingers absently straightened his already perfect tie, a nervous gesture that humanized him in a way Shen Ning hadn't anticipated. This powerful man, who controlled industries with invisible strings, struggled now with basic conversation. "The marriage?" she asked, the question that had haunted her for months. "Why not simply continue your anonymous support? Why bind me to you legally, while hiding your identity?" He moved to the window, gazing out at the glittering cityscape. "I have watched you for 7 years, he confessed, confirming what she had pieced together. "Since that day at the hospital, when you showed such extraordinary kindness to a stranger, my mother, while facing your own family's crisis." The revelation landed heavily. Shen Ning remembered the elderly woman, her quiet dignity in suffering, but had never connected her to the empire that now surrounded them. "Your resilience," he continued, "your determination to protect your mother despite overwhelming odds. It affected me in ways I couldn't articulate." His fingers traced an invisible pattern on the glass. "For someone like me, with my lament, connection is rarely possible." "So you manufactured one," she said, unable to keep the edge from her voice. He turned to face her, his expression pained. "I provided assistance, anonymously, for years, but when your mother's condition worsened significantly, I knew the financial burden would crush you." The marriage contract seemed efficient. "Efficient," she repeated, the word tasting bitter. "I lack the skills for traditional courtship," he said simply, his frankness disarming her prepared anger. "Social interaction has always been challenging for me. Maintaining precise control of my environment is how I function." As if to demonstrate, he moved to his desk, aligning a stapler that had shifted mere millimeters out of place. The action wasn't performative. Shen Yin could see the genuine relief that crossed his features when the object sat in perfect alignment with the desk edge. "Yet you arranged our paths to cross," Shen Ning observed. "The job offer, the car in the rain, moments of weakness," he admitted. "I told myself I was merely checking your welfare, but the truth was simpler. I needed to see you, even if briefly." His confession hung in the air between them, more intimate than any touch. Shen Yin felt her carefully constructed wall of indignation beginning to crumble, replaced by something more complex, understanding, tinged with lingering frustration. "You manipulated my life," she said, needing to voice the truth despite her softening resolve. "You made decisions for me without my knowledge or consent." Yes, no excuses, no justification. The simple acknowledgement struck her more powerfully than any elaborate explanation could have. He moved to a sleek cabinet and withdrew a folder, placing it on the desk between them with meticulous precision. "Now that you know my identity, I will honor our agreement. This contains divorce papers and details of a settlement that will ensure both you and your mother never face financial hardship again." Shen Ying stared at the folder, its cream-colored surface immaculate against the dark wood of his desk. Freedom, financial security, an end to this strange arrangement. Everything she had convinced herself she wanted. "I need time," she said, surprising herself with the words. He looked equally startled, his carefully composed expression slipping for a moment. "Time? Consider?" she clarified, unable to articulate the confusing swirl of emotions that prevented her from reaching for the folder. "This is more complicated than I anticipated." A silence stretched between them, not uncomfortable, but charged with unspoken possibilities. Months of mystery and manipulation should have made her decision simple, yet Shen Ning found herself hesitating at the threshold of freedom. "Of course," he finally said, his voice carrying a note she hadn't heard before. "Hope, perhaps. Take whatever time you need." She nodded, stepping back from the desk and the untouched folder. "Thank you for meeting with me, for answering my questions. Thank you," he countered quietly, "for asking them directly, rather than continuing to investigate from the shadows. It shows considerable courage." As Shen Ning turned to leave, he moved to open the door for her. In the narrow space between desk and doorway, their bodies passed close enough that their fingers brushed a momentary, accidental connection that sent an electric current racing up her arm and across her skin. His sharp intake of breath told her he had felt it too, this undeniable physical response that complicated everything further. The electric touch between them was forgotten 1 week later when financial alarms blared across Night Vision Group. Share prices plummeted 20% overnight after reports surfaced about technological flaws in their flagship security system. What began as whispers of concern escalated into full-blown panic as clients threatened to withdraw contracts worth billions. For the first time since joining the company, Shen Ying witnessed a different side of Mr. Y. The socially awkward man, who meticulously arranged items on his desk before speaking, transformed before her eyes. Gone was his hesitation in social settings, replaced by a calculating strategist who assessed the crisis with remarkable clarity. "The timing is too convenient," he stated during the emergency briefing, voice unwavering despite the chaos swirling around them. "Someone has deliberately tampered with our system protocols 3 days after the international showcase." As executives frantically reviewed security footage and access logs, Shen Yi noticed something peculiar. The system breach occurred during her department's scheduled server maintenance. Her access credentials appeared in the logs, despite her absence from the building that evening. A chill ran through her as she realized someone had used her identity as cover for the sabotage. When she presented her findings to Director Zhan, his expression darkened. "This isn't the first time your presence has coincided with company troubles." His implication hung in the air between them, unspoken but clear. She was becoming the perfect scapegoat. The emergency board meeting called the following morning felt more like a tribunal than a strategy session. Shen Ning sat at the far end of the polished mahogany table, acutely aware of the suspicious glances directed her way. Mr. Y entered last, his tall frame rigid with tension as he took his place at the head of the table. Though he acknowledged her with a brief nod, she sensed his retreat behind professional barriers. Victoria Chen wasted no time launching the attack. "Let's address the elephant in the room. Since Ms. Shen joined our company under unusual circumstances, we've experienced unprecedented security breaches." She slid a folder across the table. Her credentials were used to access restricted areas preceding each incident. "That's impossible," Shen Ning countered, maintaining her composure despite the 12 pairs of eyes scrutinizing her every reaction. "I wasn't even in the building during those timeframes." "Perhaps not physically," Victoria replied with practiced sympathy that failed to reach her eyes. "But your access card was certainly present, and given your mysterious hiring process that bypassed all standard protocols, we must consider the possibility of corporate espionage." The board members' murmurs grew louder, their accusations bolder. One suggested her connection to Mr. Y had compromised his judgment. Another implied she had been planted by competitors. Each theory painted her as increasingly dangerous to the company's future. Mr. Y remained eerily silent throughout the exchange, his fingers drumming a precise rhythm on the table. 3 taps, pause. 3 taps, a manifestation of his anxiety that only Shen Ning recognized. His silence felt like betrayal, cutting deeper than the board's accusation. When Director Wu, a senior board member with a perpetual scowl, suggested immediate termination of her employment and a criminal investigation, Shen Ning finally stood. The room fell silent as she straightened to her full height. "I understand your need to find someone responsible for this crisis," she began, voice steady despite her racing heart. "But fabricating connections between unrelated events won't solve your actual security breach. If you examine the server logs more carefully, you'll notice the access patterns don't match my typical work behavior. Someone deliberately mimicked my credentials, while simultaneously ensuring I had documented alibis elsewhere." She opened her tablet and projected a timeline onto the main screen, highlighting discrepancies that would be obvious to anyone not blinded by the need for a convenient culprit. "Furthermore, I've identified 3 potential vulnerabilities that could have been exploited. I've prepared a full analysis for your security team." Her measured response seemed to unsettle them more than an emotional defense would have. Director Wu's face reddened with each point she made, his frustration building visibly until he suddenly pushed back from the table and advanced toward her. "Pretty words from a pretty face," he sneered, leaning into her personal space. "But we all know how you really secured your position here. You've bewitched our president, and now you're covering your tracks with technical jargon that—" His words cut off abruptly as Mr. Y moved with unexpected speed, inserting himself between them. The sudden movement scattered papers across the table, disrupting his usually meticulous order. The room fell into shocked silence. "It's enough, Director Wu." The coldness in Mr. Y's voice sent a shiver through the room. "Miss Shen has provided more useful analysis in the past 5 minutes than this entire board has managed in 24 hours of crisis." The board members stared in disbelief as their normally reserved president continued, his words precise despite the visible effort each sentence cost him. "Let me be perfectly clear. Ms. Shen's presence at this company is not up for discussion. Her credentials were compromised as part of a calculated attempt to undermine both her position and mine." He turned to face the entire board, his hands clenched at his sides to control their trembling. "Anyone questioning her loyalty is questioning my judgment, and anyone threatening her safety," his gaze fixed pointedly on Director Wu, "is threatening me directly." The implication hung heavy in the air. Mr. Y rarely exercised the full extent of his power, but when he did, careers ended. Director Wu retreated to his seat, muttering apologies that fooled no one. "Now," Mr. Yi continued, regaining his characteristic precision, "we will focus on the actual crisis. Ms. Shen's analysis provides 3 potential security breach vectors. We will investigate each thoroughly, while our PR team manages client concerns." His tone left no room for debate, as he assigned responsibilities with strategic efficiency. As the meeting concluded and executives filed out with subdued expressions, Mr. Yi remained standing, his posture rigid. Only Shen Ning noticed how he avoided eye contact with everyone, how his breathing followed a controlled pattern, how he maintained exact distance from each person who passed, all techniques to manage the overwhelming social interaction he had just endured. When the room emptied, leaving them alone, Shen Ying approached cautiously. His hands trembled visibly now as the adrenaline subsided, leaving him vulnerable in a way she had never witnessed before. He methodically straightened papers that had scattered during his confrontation with Director Wu, aligning each edge with precision. "You didn't need to defend me," she said softly. His movements paused. "I did." The simple response contained unexpected weight. "They were wrong about you. The company's reputation is worthless if built on injustice." He finally looked at her directly, his eyes clear despite his physical distress. "I've spent my life hiding behind walls of protocol and procedure. It's efficient, safe." His fingers resumed their nervous arrangement of papers, but sometimes efficiency must yield to what is right. In that moment, Shen Ying saw beyond the powerful CEO, beyond the social awkwardness, beyond the meticulous habits. She saw a man fighting his own nature to protect someone he cared about, a battle far more difficult than any corporate crisis. "Thank you," she said simply, understanding that elaborate gratitude would only increase his discomfort. He nodded once, then returned to organizing the conference materials with methodical precision. But something had fundamentally shifted between them. Crisis had stripped away pretense, revealing not just Mr. Y's brilliant strategic mind, but also his capacity for fierce loyalty, a quality no business report could have uncovered. 2 weeks after Mr. Y's public defense of Shen Ning, the board delivered their verdict. The morning sun had barely risen over the city skyline when Mr. Y's grandfather, the founding patriarch of E Group, convened an emergency meeting of major shareholders. Their ultimatum arrived without warning. He must terminate his relationship with Shen Ning or surrender control of the family empire. Ms. Lin delivered the news to Shen Ning with characteristic directness. "The board has issued an ultimatum to Mr. Yan," she said, her voice betraying unusual emotion. "They demand he end his association with you or face removal from his position." His grandfather personally led the charge. She hesitated, then added, "I've never seen such determination to remove someone from the family fold." Shen Ning felt as if the floor had disappeared beneath her feet. The revelation struck her with physical force. Her presence in his life was threatening everything Mr. Yi had spent his life building. The empire his family had constructed over 3 generations now hung in the balance. Because of her, "Thank you for telling me," she managed, her voice surprisingly steady despite the storm of emotions within. "Please, don't share that you've informed me." That night, Shen Ning stood at the panoramic windows of the penthouse, watching lights flicker across the vast cityscape. The same view that once symbolized intimidating wealth now represented an impossible choice for the man she had come to care for deeply. How could she ask him to choose between his birthright and his heart? The answer was simple. She couldn't. In the morning, she requested a private meeting with Mr. Y. When they met in his office, the weight of what she needed to do made each word feel like lifting stone. "I know about the ultimatum," she began, watching his expression shift from professional composure to genuine surprise. "I can't be the reason you lose everything you've built." Mr. Y's hands, usually so steady and precise, trembled slightly as he rearranged items on his desk. "You weren't meant to know about that situation," he said, his voice controlled but strained. "The board's demands are unreasonable. I'm handling it." "Your family built this company over generations," Shen Ning continued. "I'm one person. The math is simple." She forced herself to look directly into his eyes. "I'll leave. Voluntarily. No negotiations needed." The silence that followed was heavy with unspoken words. For a man who calculated risk with mathematical precision, this scenario had no clear solution: his empire or his heart. What algorithm could possibly solve such an equation? "It won't be necessary," he finally said, but his voice lacked conviction. For the first time since she'd known him, Mr. Y seemed uncertain, caught between worlds that couldn't coexist. The following days brought mounting pressure. His grandfather arrived from abroad, taking residence in the executive suite. Board members cornered Mr. Y in hallways, speaking in hushed but urgent tones. The corporate machine that had always moved in perfect synchrony with his commands now seemed to be turning against its master. Media outlets began publishing speculative pieces about trouble at the top of E Group. Business analysts questioned the stability of the company's leadership. Employees divided into factions, some fiercely loyal to Mr. Y, others aligning with the board and tradition. Through it all, Shen Ning watched the toll it took on him. The dark circles under his eyes deepened. His movements, always deliberate, became rigid with tension. Each day, the pressure mounted, and each day, she realized more clearly what needed to be done. On a rainy Wednesday evening, when she knew Mr. Y would be in meetings until late, Shen Yang packed her belongings. She folded each garment carefully, leaving behind everything that had been gifted to her. She wrote a simple note and placed it on the kitchen counter, where he would see it first thing. "I refuse to be the reason you lose everything. Thank you for showing me kindness when I needed it most. Goodbye." With one last look at the penthouse that had never truly felt like home, she closed the door behind her and disappeared from his life. For 3 days, Shen Ying returned to her old routine. She rented a small room in a boarding house, applied for positions at local businesses, and tried to convince herself she'd made the right choice. Each night, she stared at her phone, willing it not to ring, while simultaneously hoping it would. On the 4th morning, rain tapped against her window as she prepared for a job interview. The knock at her door was so soft, she almost missed it. When she opened it, the sight of Mr. Y standing there, without his usual perfect suit, his hair slightly disheveled, momentarily stopped her breath. "You left," he said simply. "I had to," she replied. "Your family." "I resigned my position yesterday," he interrupted, the words falling between them like stones into still water. Shen Yin stared in disbelief. "You? What? The company? Your family built that over generations. It's your legacy." "A legacy means nothing without someone to share it with," he said, his voice unexpectedly gentle. "I've spent my life arranging the world into perfect, predictable patterns. Then you arrive, disrupting everything, and making me realize how empty those patterns were." He took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "For the first time in my life, I made a decision based not on logic or profit margins, but on what I couldn't bear to lose. And it wasn't the company. But your family will eventually understand, or they won't. Either way, I've made my choice." He reached for her hand, his touch hesitant. "I am your husband," he said, echoing the words from a contract that had once been merely transaction. "Not because of a document we signed, but because I choose to be. If you'll have me." In that moment, standing in the doorway of her modest room, Shen Yin understood the magnitude of what he had sacrificed. This man, who had built his identity around control and success, had surrendered his empire rather than surrender his heart. "What will you do now?" she asked, unable to process the enormity of his choice. A smile, rare and genuine, transformed his face. "I have savings. Knowledge." Shen Yin felt tears well in her eyes. The choice before her was clear, yet overwhelming. To choose a future with this man meant facing uncertainty, potential hardship, and the continued disapproval of powerful people. Yet it also meant choosing authenticity over convenience and love over security. "Are you sure?" she whispered. "You've given up so much." "I haven't given up anything of true value," he replied. "I've only set down a burden I didn't realize I was carrying until you showed me a different way to live." As they stood at this crossroads, rain pattering softly outside, the question hung between them. Could two people from such vastly different worlds truly build a life together? The path ahead was uncharted, filled with challenges neither could fully anticipate. His family would not easily accept defeat. Society would question their choices. The transition from corporate power to ordinary life would test him in ways he couldn't imagine. The ink on his resignation letter had barely dried when the whispers began. A powerful family doesn't surrender control without extracting its pound of flesh. While Shen Yin and Mr. Yi attempted to build their new life together, shadows from his past were already gathering, preparing to reveal exactly how far the wealthy and privileged would go to protect what they consider rightfully theirs. Rain pattered against the windows of their modest apartment, a far cry from the penthouse they had left behind. Mr. Ya stood by the kitchen counter, brow furrowed in concentration as he attempted to operate the coffee maker for the first time. Shen Ying watched him with a mixture of amusement and tenderness. This man who had commanded an empire was now struggling with basic household appliances, yet the determined set of his jaw revealed more about his character than any corporate triumph. "I never realized how many things were done for me," he admitted, looking up with a self-deprecating smile that transformed his usually serious face. "I designed systems that power cities, yet I can't make coffee without burning it." These small moments of vulnerability between them had become precious. Each day brought new discoveries. His first attempt at grocery shopping, his bewilderment at public transportation, his childlike fascination with street food vendors. For a man who had lived behind walls of wealth and isolation, the ordinary world was simultaneously overwhelming and exhilarating. But their peaceful adjustment was short-lived. The first attack came in the form of frozen bank accounts. Mr. Y's personal assets, substantial though separate from the family business, were suddenly inaccessible. Legal notices arrived, citing suspicious activity that required investigation, though his expression remained calm as he explained the situation to Shen Ning. The tight grip he maintained on the documents betrayed his anger. "They believe financial pressure will force us apart," he explained, methodically arranging the papers in perfect alignment on the table, a habit from his obsessive-compulsive tendencies that emerged when he felt stressed. "They expect you to leave when comfort disappears." Shen Ning took his hands in hers. "I lived without luxury before. I can do it again." The conviction in her voice seemed to steady him. Their resolve was tested again when Shino orchestrated a more vicious attack. Fabricated stories appeared in tabloids and social media, tales of Xinyin's alleged criminal past, claims she had manipulated vulnerable men before, suggestions that she was involved in corporate espionage. Photos of her mother's hospital room appeared alongside veiled threats about continued care requiring continued goodwill. Mr. Y's family wielded influence like a scalpel, precise and cutting. Their campaign extended beyond mere public humiliation. Suppliers refused to do business with Mr. Y's new startup venture. Landlords suddenly found reasons to reject rental applications. Former colleagues avoided them at social gatherings. Yet something unexpected emerged from this crucible of pressure. Rather than retreating into his former shell of isolation, Mr. Y stepped forward. At a charity event they attended, despite knowing his family would be present, he no longer lurked in shadows or spoke through intermediaries. When whispers followed their entrance, he took Shen Ning's hand firmly in his and navigated the crowd with newfound confidence. "They want me to be ashamed of choosing you," he told her quietly. "I refuse to give them that satisfaction." One evening, as they sat on their small balcony, watching the city lights flicker to life, Mr. Y shared his birth name with Shen Ning, the first time he had spoken it aloud to anyone in years. He described a childhood of impossible expectations, of being valued for his brilliant mind but criticized for his social awkwardness. He spoke of learning to hide his struggles behind wealth and power, creating the mysterious Mr. Y persona as armor against a world that had no patience for his differences. "First time I saw you," he confessed, "was in that hospital corridor. You were 16, volunteering during summer break. My mother was receiving treatment, and I was overwhelmed. You didn't know who I was. No one did in that setting, but you noticed I was struggling. You guided me to the quieter waiting area without making a fuss, brought me water, and simply sat nearby, without demanding conversation. It was the first time someone had accommodated my needs, without making me feel broken." He described watching her over the years, impressed by her resilience as she faced her own mother's illness and financial struggles. What had begun as gratitude evolved into admiration, then something deeper he hadn't been equipped to understand. "The marriage contract was the only way I knew to help you without frightening you away," he admitted. "I lacked the social skills for anything else." This confession marked a turning point in their relationship. The final barrier between them dissolved as Shen Ning realized that, despite his unconventional approach, his feelings had always been authentic, merely expressed through the only channels his unique mind could navigate. Their moment of reckoning came at the annual Business Leaders Summit. Though no longer CEO, Mr. Y had been invited to speak about innovation, an olive branch from industry colleagues who respected his brilliance regardless of family politics. Shen Ying stood beside him as they entered the grand hall, aware of cameras tracking their movement and the sudden hush that fell over the crowd. Mr. Y's grandfather and former board members positioned themselves strategically near the stage. Shino hovered nearby with several journalists, clearly prepared for some planned confrontation. The tension was palpable as Mr. Y was introduced and took his place at the podium. Just as he began to speak, his grandfather rose, dramatically declaring he had evidence of corporate sabotage linked directly to Shen Ning. He brandished documents, claiming they contained proof that would destroy any credibility the couple had left. The audience stirred, anticipating scandal. Cameras flashed, journalists leaned forward eagerly. But Mr. Y simply stepped away from the podium and walked to Shen Ning's side. Without speaking, he took her hand and faced the crowd. The small gesture conveyed more than any rebuttal could: absolute trust, unwavering support, complete unity. When he finally spoke, his voice carried throughout the silent room. "I've spent my life hiding behind wealth and power because I believed they defined my worth. I was wrong. True worth is found in the courage to be vulnerable, to connect authentically with another person, despite fear." He looked at Shen Ying with such open affection that several audience members shifted uncomfortably, suddenly feeling like intruders on a private moment. "Some of you see our relationship as a scandal. I see it as the first honest choice I've ever made." The simplicity of this declaration, delivered without defensiveness or anger, shifted the atmosphere in the room. What had been prepared as a dramatic confrontation deflated in the face of such genuine emotion. Even the most cynical journalist present recognized the rare authenticity between them, something that couldn't be manufactured or performed. As they walked from the stage hand in hand, cameras captured what would become the defining image of their story. Not a scandal, but a redemption. Where there should have been shame or defiance, there was instead a quiet dignity and palpable connection that spoke louder than any accusation. And in the end, what began as a desperate transaction transformed into something neither could have imagined. Standing together at the charity gala where they first met years ago, Shen Ning and Mr. Y represented a truth greater than wealth or status: that genuine connections can blossom even in the most unexpected circumstances. Their journey revealed that true strength doesn't lie in corporate empires or financial security, but in the willingness to be vulnerable and authentic. What started as a contract evolved through shared experiences and mutual respect, defying the boundaries of what society expected from either of them. They had discovered what neither was searching for but both desperately needed: someone who saw beyond their circumstances to their true essence.